Welcome, everyone. My name is Lawanda Banks. I am an educator, author, and the founder of Learning with Lawanda. I am passionate about helping families create grounded, supportive learning environments where children can grow academically, emotionally, and confidently. Through the Rooted Parent series, my goal is to offer parents practical tools, meaningful reflection, and encouragement for the journey of raising rooted, thriving children. So I am glad you are here tonight. This evening, our workshop is called Hidden Messages: What Your Child Behavior is Really Saying. In this Rooted Parent workshop, we're going to look beyond behavior on the surface and begin to understand what may be happening underneath it. So let's get this presentation started. I'm going to share my slides at this time. Never mind that. We are working on this here, why traditional discipline often backfires and creates more problems. This is what we're looking at. Hidden messages, what your child's behavior is really saying. So often, as parents, caregivers, and educators, we are taught to focus on stopping the behavior. We want the yelling to stop, the attitude to stop, the meltdowns to stop, the shutdowns to stop. But many times, behavior is not just something to correct, it is something to understand. Tonight, I want to invite you into a different lens. Instead of asking only, how do I make this stop? We're also going to ask, what is this child trying to communicate? Because many times behavior is not rebellion, it's overwhelm. It's not manipulation, it's need. It's not always disrespect. It's often dysregulation, stress, fear, frustration, or disconnection. So our goal is not permissiveness. Our goal is understanding, connection, and healthier responses that actually help children grow. Let's begin with one of the biggest mindset shifts we can make as adults. So, we're going to see what your child's behavior is really saying. So, we're going to transform your understanding. This workshop series helps you build deeper connections with your children by understanding what drives their behavior. You'll learn to see challenging moments as opportunities for connection rather than battles to win. Today's focus is uncovering the hidden messages behind behaviors that frustrate, confuse, or exhaust you as a parent. So, the truth about bad behavior is actually a communication issue. So, it's not defiance. What looks like rebellion is often your child's attempt to communicate an unmet need they can't express in words. It can be also a call for help or an invitation. So, one of the most powerful truths we can learn is that we often call bad behavior is frequently communication. It's like a communication problem. So it's not necessarily a behavior problem, it's more of a communication problem. When a child is melting down, refusing or whining or lashing out, withdrawing or acting out, they may be expressing something they don't have the words yet to put into exactly to express how they feel. So the first point is not defiance. What looks like rebellion is often an unmet need. The child may be tired, hungry, overstimulated, confused. The child may be grieving or embarrassed or frustrated or emotionally flooded. They may not have the language or regulation skills to tell us what's wrong. So their behavior speaks for them. So when you think that their behavior is them being defiant and not wanting to listen to you or do what it is that they're asking you to do, they may be going through some strong feelings that we may not even think that they're going through or that they still may be going through, because we go through issues that with loss and grieving and embarrassment or frustrations also, but we have the words to explain how we feel, or we allow more allowance for adults to get away with certain things sometimes, but sometimes not the children, and the children also have their issues where they're trying to be able to express themselves, but they may not have the words for it. So another part is the call for help. Challenging behaviors are your child's way of saying, I need something, when they lack the skills to ask directly. So you should try something that may be like reassurance or support, or put in a different type of structure or attention or rest or connection or sensory relief or help solving the problem. So sometimes their bad behavior can be a call for help, and we have to figure out exactly what it is that this child needs and try to put that into place, because it may just be a structural problem that's causing this unwanted behavior that we're seeing from them. And sometimes bad behavior is actually an invitation for us to improve that communication. So every difficult moment invites you to get curious about what your child is really trying to tell you. So that's where we should pause and ask, what might my child be feeling? What might the child be feeling right now? What need may be underneath this moment? What is really being communicated here? This does not mean every behavior is acceptable, though. It means that every behavior is meaningful. So if you see a child is defiant or acting out, they may just be needing you to give them some more attention, to talk to them and show them that you really care about them more than, maybe you might be on your cell phone too much, or you may be spending too much time at work and not enough time with the child, so they may act out in some kind of way, or they may be having issues at school and don't know how to talk about it. So we have to look at some of these changed behaviors, or some what we might call bad behaviors, and really try to get to the root of that. So um, when we shift from judgment to curiosity, we stop seeing children as problems to fix and start to see them as people to understand. Let's make that even more practical by looking at some common challenging behaviors and what may be underneath them. So, meltdowns. Meltdowns often signal sensory or emotional overwhelm. When your child's nervous system is flooded and they've lost access to rational thinking, they tend to have a meltdown. So here's an example. A child may be, I had my daughter, for instance, when she was, I think Cameron was about 4 years old, 3 or 4 years old. We went to take Bryant to his school on campus, and in the waiting area, in the main waiting area, they had this abacus on a stand, and she was all enthralled with this manipulative device. And when it was time for us to leave from checking Bryant in, she had a complete meltdown. And that is because I didn't necessarily offer her a proper transition time, or I didn't let her know in advance, okay, we're only going to go in for a few more minutes and then we're going to have to leave. I find that sometimes when I didn't offer her a proper transition, it would trigger a meltdown, and only thing that her body is saying right now is that this is too much for me right now. Like just walking away or breaking away from that moment of fun into, okay, we're leaving. It just was a lot for her to process at that time. So that's just like a simple example of what I could offer as it goes with my own personal experience with having a child who would have had meltdowns. Um, so then we have withdrawals. It may indicate a need for safety or processing time. Your child is protecting themselves from something that feels threatening. So it's often like some children act out loudly and others go quiet and they shut down. They avoid eye contact, they isolate, they stop talking. Their behavior may be saying, I'm overwhelmed again, or I feel unsafe, or I need time before I can open up. And if your child is feeling overwhelmed or feeling unsafe, it's important for us to make sure that we find some kind of way to have them to open up with us, to let us know what's going on. Because sometimes a very traumatic experience could have happened to them and they just can't find the words to share it. So they need some time to process it and also to think about who and if they want to share it with someone. So when you see that your child is going through withdrawals, it's important to take heed and to try to get to the bottom of it in a calm way, in a rational way, not in a judgmental way. Um, you may also see that children may go through attitude shifts. So that's like it reveals a developmental testing. They're learning about boundaries. They're learning about autonomy. They're learning about how relationships work. So their attitude might change a bit. They may even see adults acting like they might think it's hypocritical. Like an adult might tell a child, "Oh, make sure when you go out to drive, you drive a certain kind of way," and then they see the child is watching the adult drive and the adult may not be driving as safe. So they may say something to the adult and the adult say something back to the child like, I'm grown, don't talk to me. And now that can cause the child to have an attitude shift because they're just talking about, what they observe. But sometimes parents don't like to be corrected or brought out. Also, when a girl, for instance, or a young man may be developing physically, they may they may show different attitudes. It may be a little hormonal. So they may want more boundaries, more privacy as their bodies are changing. They may have attitude because they feel cranky in a certain kind of day because they're going through their monthly cycles. So there can be all sorts of different things that can really test the child's developmental mindset as they're learning about boundaries, as they're learning about taking care of themselves, as they're learning about how relationships work. When you even look at families when they're going through separation or divorce, all of those things can cause children to change their attitude and behaviors. And we have to be cognizant of that, mindful of that, so that if they're showing these types of behaviors, we can help them to process it in a calm and rational way. So, aggression is another um, challenging behavior that families, parents, and caregivers tend to deal with at times. And it shows a lack of coping skills. So your child wants to solve a problem but doesn't know how. So it may look like a child hitting a sibling over a toy. So this hidden message may be, I am frustrated and I don't know how to handle this conflict. So when we learn to listen beneath the behavior, our response becomes more effective, more grounded, and more humane. So if you see that a child is snappy, for instance, at the end of at the end of school or after school, they're a little bit snappy. He might be, look, I'm mentally and emotionally drained. But when they're showing aggressive, snappy behaviors, or they're hitting their younger sibling because they don't want to be bothered by them, things like that, we can then look at them and have a conversation with them and see what are your underlying problems. Why do you feel like you need to express yourself in this aggressive way? Because the aggression is not anything that we really want to tolerate. So try to get to the bottom of that. Don't encourage children to be aggressive toward each other even. I've seen sometimes people with twins or young cousins and siblings, they sometimes might try to pin them on each other. They think it's funny, but it's not. And then you're training them to be aggressive. Or if they show aggressive behaviors as young children and you don't stop to talk to them about those behaviors, they'll grow up being aggressive, and then you can't handle it because they're too grown and maybe even bigger or stronger than you. So it's important to take care and take heed and be mindful and watchful of our kids as we're going through these challenging behaviors, meltdowns, withdrawals, attitude shifts, and aggression, because they're basically showing that they are having an issue with dealing with whatever circumstance they may be having. It could be as simple as learning how to um, accommodate the arrival of a new sibling in the household, or learning how to make new friends in a new school and learning to be in a different community. It's like different things can happen that can cause a child to go through any of these types of circumstances simply because you moved from one house in a neighborhood into a whole different neighborhood. So because they can't process their emotions as much or as well as an adult can, that children need to be helped with through conversation and other means so that they can learn the language to explain how they really feel and learn how to cope with those emotions. So why traditional discipline often backfires and create more problems? So there's shame disconnects, there's the fear doesn't teach, and the power struggle escalate. Traditional discipline addresses the behavior but ignores the underlying need, which means the behavior will return often stronger than before. So many of us were raised with discipline models that focus heavily on shame, fear, or control and punishment. And when those methods may sometimes create quick compliance, they often do not create true learning. So we are talking about shame. When a child is already overwhelmed and an adult responds with humiliation, harsh criticism, or labeling, the child often does not learn better behavior. Instead, they may shut down, feel smaller, become defensive, or disconnect from the adult, which was what we were talking about earlier in this other slide with the meltdowns, the withdrawals, the attitude shifts, and possible aggression. So I see like on social media, sometimes you may see a parent punish the child by cutting off their hair when they had dreads or longer hairstyles or certain things. They try to embarrass their child on social media for an unwanted behavior, but that just makes the wedge even further between the child and the parent. It really breaks that relationship when a parent tries to embarrass a child like that, or when they're using discipline with fear. It's like you're up in the child's face and you're trying to talk to them, talk down on them, and use your power and aggression on them. That doesn't make a child want to open up to you. It'll make them keep shut off from you. They can't feel safe under those types of circumstances. It's very demeaning. It's inhumane. So the way that we talk to our children when it's time to discipline them, we still have to be mindful that they are human beings, that they do have a brain, and that these behaviors can cause mental and emotional issues that can go on into adulthood. So The fear doesn't teach. When children comply out of fear, they're not learning self-regulation. They're learning to hide their struggles from you. So if a child, even if a child is going through something and they fear that you're going to beat them, like if a girl, for instance, got into a circumstance in a relationship with a boy and something happened, she may fear telling her parent that she did certain things with the boy because of what the parent might do, or if she got pregnant she might fear, oh, I don't want to tell my parent because what are they going to do to me, because now she's going through a teen pregnancy. Sometimes even young adults fear telling their parents that they're pregnant, for instance, because they're afraid of what their parent is going to say, possibly because they're out of wedlock or something like that, or in the way in which they got pregnant, it wasn't in a serious relationship. But our children depend on us when they're going through problems. So if you're going to discipline them and it's putting fear, it doesn't build emotional regulation. It doesn't help with the problem solving or internal responsibility. It teaches children to avoid consequences, not necessarily to develop the skill. So they would try to hide the things that they're doing and hide their struggles from you because of the way in which you discipline them when you put fear into them. Sometimes they hide their struggles so deeply that parents have no idea what the kids are going through. And then when it can turn out where the child goes into an extreme case and even causes harm to themselves, and the parent couldn't understand why, but it's because you've instilled such high level of fear with them, with coming to you about their problems in the way in which you react to it when they open up, that they would prefer not to share it with you at all. So that teaches your children to not necessarily open up, but more separate further from you because you're not a safe space for them emotionally or mentally or physically when they come to you, when they have a problem that they need to deal with. And then the power struggles escalate. Control-based discipline creates an adversarial dynamic where everyone loses. It teaches that relationships are more about winning, not understanding. Sorry, I have allergies. So when discipline becomes a battle of control, everyone loses. The moment turns into winning versus understanding. And many times the original issue gets buried under anger, resistance, and emotional intensity. Traditional discipline often addresses behavior on the surface while ignoring the unmet need or mistaken skill underneath. That's why the behavior may come back again and again. So it's like if a child goes outside and they stay out late, you beat them. You didn't really get down to the crux of talking to the child about the importance of coming home at a decent hour or the importance of following home rules. They're just going to continue that behavior again because some children, they actually get used to the discipline and they expect it. So they prefer some of these kids will be like, I'm still gonna go and have my fun and take my punishment later. And it's not really teaching them the dangers of why you didn't want them to participate in whatever it was that they were doing. They do it anyway. So it's also about teaching them or getting them to the point where they're respecting the rules and the different boundaries and perimeters that you as a parent set in the household. So, so why behaviors may repeat, there's an important brain-based reason for that. So the science behind behavior as feedback, understanding your child's behavior, there's a neuroscience that reveals the truth. So your child's brain developed from bottom up. The primitive emotional brain matures first, while the rational problem-solving prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed until their mid-20s. So so that's why children cry when they're going through it. They're not fully emotional yet, and their rational brain isn't coming together until their mid-20s. So you may have a 21-year-old or 22-year-old. They behave as if they're still teenagers because their prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed yet. And we still have to give our children time to fully develop. I don't necessarily agree with the fact that children, when they graduate high school at 18, that they need to be in their own place, or at 20, that they need to be in their own place, especially if you notice that the individual child, that their mental development isn't fully formed yet. We should allow them the chance to fully develop before putting full adult responsibilities on them. So, like for me and my household, we would like our kids to feel comfortable with staying with us until they're a bit older in their 20s and not earlier in their 20s. And if they want to stay in the family unit longer, well, it's up to them. We're not forcing them. But there is a great big world out there for them to go and enjoy. But as they're still developing and as into young adults, we're still providing that hedge of protection over them. So during stress, children literally lose access to their higher thinking. They can't just calm down or think about their choices because those brain regions go offline. So it's important that we understand that they can have stressful circumstances even at 20, 21 years old and not know how to deal with it. So we have to be able to be mindful of that sometimes and not be so judgmental on the child or expecting of the child um, to always be able to do it the full adulty way because they may not fully be there in their development. So children's brains are still developing, and the emotional and reactive parts of the brain mature earlier, while parts responsible for planning and impulse control, reasoning, and self-regulation develop much later. So when we say calm down, use your words, or think about your choices, we need to remember that some children cannot easily access those abilities while dysregulated. This is why behavior can be understood as feedback. It gives us information about what might be happening in the child's nervous system right now. So the key insight is this: your child is not always giving you a hard time. Often your child is having a hard time, and when we understand that, our response begins to change. So if behavior is feedback, how do we respond in a rooted, healthy, and effective way for our kids? So if our child is having a difficult time, a better response would be to pause, regulate, get curious. So one of the most important things that we can do as an adult is pause. Before connecting with the child, ask yourself, what is happening here? What might my child be feeling? What need might be underneath this moment? Is this disobedience, or is this overwhelm, fear, fatigue, confusion, or dysregulation? So we have to first think about why our child is behaving the way they're behaving, try to pinpoint which of these things it is, and then we need to regulate ourselves. We do not want to go and approach the child when we're also feeling heightened or stressed. So it's important that we can go and approach those children and talk to them in a calm way because children borrow from our nervous systems. If we come in loud or rushed and emotionally charged, we often intensify the moment. If we come in grounded, calm, and steady, we help create safety. So if you see that the child is already stressed and you're coming in with extra stress, that's not going to help the circumstance at all. So it's better that we regulate first. We breathe. We understand what might be happening with the child so that when we go and talk to the child, we're coming in more as a comfort and as a grounded presence than somebody who is trying to make it even worse by exacerbating it with our reactions. So you can get curious and say, and you can say like, okay, you look like you're having a hard time, or this looks like this feeling is very big for you right now. You could have just heard that your grandmother died. You could have just the child could have just lost all of their art that's inside of their hard drive on their computer. They could have, their very favorite toy could have accidentally flown out of the window on the side of the road and you can't get it back. And that child is going through an emotional response. It's not okay to say, oh, it's just a toy, you can get another one, or reduce that feeling that they're going through. You can explain to them, it looks like you're going through a hard time, and I understand that this is hard for you. Let's figure this out. Do you think we can maybe get another one or something like that? You can actually try and offer them some other suggestions that can come and calm that circumstance that they're going through. So you should respond instead of react. You can help and figure it out together with your child. You can still hold a boundary. You can still say no if a child is behaving in an unreasonable way. You can still say, no, we're not going to do this. We're going to think about it because I think what's happening is da 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 da, and give them some suggestive things in which they can come and correct that behavior. But if you're doing it from connection. You want to connect with the child and not have emotional chaos when they're already going through a heightened emotional state. So, so some of the things that you can say to your child is, I see you're having a hard time. You're upset. I'm here. So if you're upset, come and talk to me. I want to help you get better. Or you can say, let's slow this down together. It seems like you're angry. You're not going to go out there and do anything. Let's calm down and really think about our choices. Or you don't have the words yet, but I'm listening. Think about what it is that you want to say, and I'm right here waiting to hear you when you're ready to talk. Or I'm going to help you get through this. That there can be the most powerful and comforting thing to a child when they're going through a very stressful or triggering circumstance to say, I got you. I'm going to be here to help you through this step by step. And be that promise that you said you're going to be to them. Be that person that you say you're going to be, that support system, and be there for that child. So these phrases do not remove accountability, but they create a kind of connection that makes accountability possible. So that way they can say, yeah, I know I was wrong. I know I overreacted, but I'm glad that you were here to help me through with all of that. So I'm going to give you guys some everyday scenarios and rooted responses. So here we go. Scenario one. If a child is melting down because it's time to leave the park, the rooted response may sound like, I know you're upset. It's hard to stop when you're having fun. I'm going to help you get to the car. So if they're still kicking and screaming, you can then say, no, we're not going to kick and scream. We can come to the park again next week. You can choose a time, or if you continue, we're just not going to get to come to the park again. So you can give them that option to try to calm their behavior and really reason it out. Or you can say, we have to go to do this now. Or sometimes you can offer them a reward if they're acting out and say, okay, we're going to go now, but when we get home, you can get this, or you can get that, or you can do this or the other, and give them something to look forward to with the transition. But it's always It's always good to allow your child some time in advance when it's time to go. So when I'm at the park with my children, I would give them a 15-minute countdown warning. Then I would give them a 10-minute countdown warning. Then I'll go 5 minutes countdown. And then we're counting down. And then I also like to tell them before we go to the park, we're going to be at the park for this amount of time. And afterwards, we're going to go and do this. And I try to have something fun lined up after the park so that they can look forward to leaving the park. Because more it's about teaching them how to transition and not get overwhelmed with the transition. Especially younger children. I'm talking about toddlers, 5-year-olds, 7-year-olds. So here's another scenario. If a child is rude after school, the rooted response may sound like, "You seem really on edge right now. I'm going to give you a little space and we can talk when you're ready." Because we don't know what happened. We don't know what they're thinking. Sometimes we can see, let them cool down and then come to you. Just letting them know that you're here to wait to hear what's happening with them and allow them that autonomy. That can help give them a little respect for their feelings and also still keep boundaries established. If a child hits a sibling, the rooted response may sound like, "I won't let you hit. You're angry. I'm going to help you handle that differently." You're letting them know right away, "I'm not letting you do that. You're not going to hit them. Now, whatever your feeling is, we're going to figure that out so we can deal with it." So if it's like you're hitting the sibling because they're on the couch and they're being rambunctious around you, so you hit them, tell them stop. Well, we can be like, "Okay, well, I need to teach the younger child that you don't do that also, but you also need to know that we're not going to hit your younger sibling. That's not the way to handle it." You can call an adult. You can say, "Hey, mom, this child is being rambunctious," or you can offer that child something to do, or you can pause your show if it's something that can be paused, because sometimes little ones, they do that for attention. So we need to look at the age of the child, what they're doing, and their intent, because two siblings can also be having two different types of behaviors that we're working on at the same time. So if the child shuts down during homework, the rooted response may sound like, "This feels frustrating. Let's break into smaller steps together." Homework help can be sometimes overwhelming, not just for the child, but for the parent. Sometimes parents just assume that just because the child is in a certain grade, they should be able to do something, or they assume that if they're coming home with the homework, they already went over it in the class. But there are sometimes that children come home with homework and the teachers haven't had a chance to even teach the concept to the students. So sometimes they really don't know, or even if it was taught, maybe they didn't understand the example that was given in the classroom, and they honestly have difficulty in understanding that homework. So if the parent lacked the skill to teach the child how to do the homework, because the parent may not know it, because of their level of education, or just that it's something different or vague that they weren't in the class to get the full understanding of the lesson, it may be difficult for the parent to teach that to the child or to explain it. So the parent can be feeling frustrated at the performance level of the child, and the child can also be feeling frustrated because they don't fully understand what's going on. So sometimes it's good to just take a break and a breather. Sometimes you can just also reach out to the teacher and let the teacher know, "I'm having difficulty with this." Or you can get your children into tutoring. That can also help if you notice that you're struggling with helping your child academically. Learning with Lawanda, I'm just throwing in a little commercial here. Learning with Lawanda offers tutoring services that helps parents a great deal, especially when they start the tutoring from the beginning of the year, and we're working on the content mastery, not homework help, but content mastery through the year, so that by the time it's time for their examinations and such, they can pass those things because they've had enough practice throughout the whole school year with after school tutoring. And we also do in-house tutoring too, but in service, homeschool support. But so there are some different things that we can do. If a parent notices that they're feeling frustrated with what's happening, it's better that you take your break before going and approaching the child because it doesn't make any sense. And remember that these children are human beings. They have brains. They're going to grow up to be adults. So the way that we treat them is going to reflect later when they get into adulthood. And we're hoping not to inflict trauma on children because it can be very devastating as they mature. Trust me, from my own experience, I wrote my trilogy, A Seed from the Garden of Eve, where I did highlight some personal traumas that I went through and how they were handled and the effects that those traumas also had on me. Pardon me one moment. Sorry. So all of these, I have allergies at this moment, so I apologize for that. But so all of these different types of scenarios that I gave, there are just some standard scenarios that could be going on. But it's important that we notice the pattern, that we name what we see, that we hold the boundary, we offer support, and we teach the next step. That's what rooted discipline looks like. So if you notice that, okay, this is happening, this child has been withdrawn now for 2, 3 days. They've been snappy for the last 2 weeks. Notice the pattern of the behavior and name exactly what it is that we're seeing and hold that boundary of expectation. We're not going to have this type of behavior. We're not going to have the screaming. We're not going to have the shouting. Let them know what we're going to be expecting, but offer support and also teach them the steps in which they need to use to get out of that heightened emotional state into a more regulated state that we all look for. So behavior gives us information. It tells us when the child is overwhelmed. It tells us when the child is disconnected. It tells us when a child lacks a skill. It tells us when a child needs safety, structure, coaching, reassurance, or rest. Sometimes they're acting cranky because they're just tired. So when we stop seeing behavior only as an interruption and begin seeing it as information, we become more effective adults. It doesn't mean that we excuse anything. It means that we're responding wisely because we're still going to have our boundaries put up on the expected behaviors and the behaviors that we don't want. But what we're doing is going a step further in responding to them in a way that we want to make those connections and not only correct the behavior, but also make that deeper emotional connection with the child. And we teach the child that if they're lacking a skill that's causing that emotional response, we're teaching them and giving them the skills that they need so that they know how to deal with it if they're ever faced with that sort of issue again. So over time, that kind of response helps the child to build the trust. It teaches them regulation. It teaches them resilience and emotional intelligence because we stop and took that time to talk to them, identify the behavior, let them know what's socially acceptable or what's acceptable within our families, and also give them the tools that they need because they're still learning and they're still growing, and it's up to us to teach our children how they should behave. So so before we close, I want to leave this reflection. What behavior has been the hardest for me to understand? What might be underneath it? And how can I respond with more curiosity and calm? So whichever behavior your child is having that you're having the hardest time understanding, try to figure out that behavior and what might be causing that behavior. And then how can you learn more about that behavior and also how to help them deal with that behavior in a calm way. Those are some reflections that you guys can think about. And so apart from that, I think that I just wanted to let you guys know that I am happy to have you here in our Rooted Parent series. And just remember this final takeaway that I want you guys to have. Um, your child is not always giving you a hard time. Often your child is having a hard time. And when we begin to understand that, we respond differently. We become calmer, we become more curious, we become more intentional. We begin to parent from connection, not just correction. That is what rooted parenting looks like. That's what it's about. It's about seeing the whole child. It's about hearing what the behavior is trying to say, and it's about helping the children grow with truth, safety, and love. So thank you for being here and doing the meaningful work with raising, guiding, and loving your children with greater understanding. We will be back here again next month with another topic that will help you to strengthen yourself and your family as a rooted parent. And I am just thankful again for you guys for being here. I'd love to open the space for questions, reflections, or examples from your own parenting journey. If there is a behavior you've been struggling with, we can talk it through what might be underneath that behavior and what a rooted response could look like. So if you have anything that you would like to share, please leave it in the message box. You can share this with someone who might need some guidance on understanding or learning how to respond better to unwanted behaviors. And I am happy to be here with this monthly series, and I will see you guys next month in the month of May for our next topic. See you then.